Welcome to the deep dive. We are so glad you are joining us today
Yeah, thanks for being here.
because the mission for this conversation is to really cut through a massive amount of noise. We need to unpack a highly complex, rapidly escalating crisis inside the Department of Homeland Security.
Right. It's a lot to sort through.
It really is. And at the center of this storm is DHS Secretary Kristi Noem and her incredibly controversial advisor, Corey Lewandowski. To get a comprehensive picture of what is actually happening behind closed doors, we are pulling from a really fascinating stack of recent reporting.
Some incredible journalism on this.
Exactly. We've got an immediate report detailing a remarkably tense House Judiciary Committee hearing. We've got a Wall Street Journal excerpt looking at the severe operational fallout from an immigration operation in Minneapolis, and an exclusive preview from The Atlantic regarding an upcoming book by NBC News reporter Julia Ainsley.
That's the one titled Undue Process.
Yes, Undue Process, the
And-
inside story of Trump's mass deportation program.
But before we really jump into the mechanics of what's happening, I just want to make a quick note on how we handle these kinds of deep dives.
Go for it.
We are looking at sources today that touch on highly polarizing figures and intense political crossfire. Our goal here is absolutely not to take a side. We are not endorsing any political action, and we are certainly not here to validate the personal rumors flying around Washington.
Exactly.
Our mission is simply to impartially synthesize the reporting in front of us and extract the underlying organizational dynamics. We are here to look strictly at the facts in the source material and analyze the structural reality of what happens when a massive federal agency faces this level of internal friction.
Couldn't have said it better. We're just looking at the facts on the page and figuring out what they tell us about how our government is functioning. And to get us started, we actually have to look at the sheer spectacle of this recent House Judiciary Committee hearing.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that hearing.
Because what was ostensibly supposed to be a standard congressional oversight hearing about President Trump's crackdown on illegal immigration, well, it very quickly devolved into something completely different.
It really did.
It became this bizarre, almost surreal scene in the Rayburn House office building. We really need to group all the moments from this hearing together to understand the vibe in that room, before we even talk about the policy.
It was quite a departure from standard procedure. I mean, the tone shifted dramatically. The committee basically moved entirely away from border policy and national security strategy and pivoted directly into the personal and professional dynamic between Secretary Noem and Corey Lewandowski.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the visuals of this moment are just as important as the dialogue. Picture the scene, right? Secretary Noem is sitting at the witness table, very deliberately styled.
Highly calculated.
Very. The reporting specifically notes she is wearing a gold watch and a $700 Veronica Beard double-breasted tweed blazer. It is an image projecting total authority, polish, and control. But sitting directly behind her, in full view of the cameras, is her husband of many years, Brian Noem.
Right in the frame.
Right in the frame. And right in the middle of this setting, Democratic Representative Sidney Comlager Dove from California leans into her microphone and asks a question that completely derails the room.
Just stops the whole thing cold.
She asks, point blank, at any time during your tenure as director of the Department of Homeland Security, have you had sexual relations with Corey Lewandowski?
It's a stunning moment for a congressional oversight hearing. I mean, both Noem and Lewandowski are married, and both have repeatedly denied the long-standing rumors of a romantic affair.
Right.
But having the question asked directly under oath, on the record, forces this very public collision between tabloid rumors and federal oversight.
Yeah.
And the presence of Noem's husband right behind her during this exchange is not just a casual detail, it is highly intentional.
It is, because according to the sources, Brian Noem just sat there completely stone-faced as his wife was grilled about her rumored level. And we know from a DHS source who spoke to the Daily Mail that this wasn't just a coincidence.
No, not at all.
This was a highly calculated play on optics. The source literally said that bringing her family to these events, instead of her usual companion Lewandowski, shows that Noem is acutely aware of how she looks in the media right now. She is actively trying to kill the media narrative and put the news cycles about her and Lewandowski behind her.
Which arguably makes the confrontation with Representative Comlager Dove backfire as a PR strategy.
Oh, totally.
Because Noem completely refused to answer the question directly. She fired back, visibly offended, complaining directly to the committee chairman, Republican Representative Jim Jordan. She said she was shocked they were peddling tabloid garbage in the committee.
Yeah, she called the accusations garbage and offensive.
But Comlager Dove didn't back down. She immediately countered with a justification for why the question is fundamentally a matter of congressional oversight, rather than just gossip.
And the exchange where they are talking over each other is pure chaos. You have Noam staring straight ahead as Kamlager-Dove starts reading a series of headlines about Noam and Lewandowski into the official record. And Chairman Jim Jordan is objecting to every single one of them.
It's a total breakdown of order.
It is. But before we get to Kamlager-Dove's core argument about national security, I want to talk about another moment from that same hearing, because it really highlights the absolute absurdity of what congressional leaders were focusing on.
Oh, the pilot incident.
Yes, this came from Democratic Representative Jamie Raskin. Wait, let me make sure I'm reading this right from the reporting. An unconfirmed advisor fired a federal pilot midair over a forgotten bag.
I know, it sounds fictional.
It sounds like a plot line from a political satire, not the Department of Homeland Security.
It really does. But Representative Raskin cited this astonishing anecdote on the record. The core of the story from the reporting is that Corey Lewandowski allegedly fired a government pilot midair. And the reason? Secretary Noem had forgotten an item on a previous government jet, and it wasn't transported over to their new flight.
Raskin famously referred to it as her blankie. He said to her, right there in the committee, when your special blanket, your blankie, was left on one of the government jets, your special government employee, Corey Lewandowski, chivalrously stepped forward to fire the pilot midair.
Just unbelievable.
Now, the Daily Mail later reported that the dismissal might have been over a bag rather than a blanket, but honestly, either way, the underlying point is staggering. And Lewandowski reportedly rehired the pilot later, which just adds to the absolute whiplash of the situation.
Raskin used that anecdote to deliver a very pointed critique about misplaced priorities. He told Noem, "You're flying high now, maybe even a little bit too close to the sun, but with all these free planes and houses and pilots, you've traveled a long distance from your actual job and the things you should be doing as head of Homeland Security."
He really nailed the contrast there.
He was actively contrasting her access to luxury government resources with her failure to execute her core responsibilities.
And let's talk about those resources because the financial details are staggering. We are talking about Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, an agency that falls directly under Noam's jurisdiction, leasing a $70 million Boeing private jet for months.
$70 million.
A $70 million aircraft. The reporting notes that her use of luxury private jets has alarmed even senior Republicans. So we have this wildly dramatic hearing covering everything from alleged affairs to $70 million jets and midair firing.
Well, that's a lot to take in.
How does Kamlager-Dove actually justify dragging all this into an official oversight hearing? What is the structural argument here?
The justification is actually deeply rooted in organizational behavior and risk management. Kamlager-Dove explicitly tells Noem that it is okay to be offended, but the question is fundamentally about her judgment and decision-making.
Right.
She links this directly to the 260,000 employees working under Noem at DHS. She states it is about conflicts of interest, and ultimately she says it's about national security risk. American lives are at risk.
That's a heavy accusation.
It is. The argument is that you cannot separate the secretary's personal judgment and the informal power she grants to her personal circle from her ability to lead a massive security apparatus.
So if this is all about the power Noam is granting Lewandowski, we really need to understand what his actual job is. He isn't just a friend hanging around the water cooler. He has a very specific and highly controversial official role at DHS. What exactly is his title, and how is it supposed to function?
What's fascinating here is his official title. It's Special Government Employee, or SGE. To give you some context based on the reporting, the SGE designation is essentially a bureaucratic mechanism designed to be a temporary, restricted title.
Like a consultant.
Exactly. It allows outside experts to come into the government and offer niche knowledge to the federal bureaucracy without having to completely leave the private sector. You typically see it used for highly specialized subject matter experts advising on very specific technical issues, like a cybersecurity expert coming in for a few months to consult on a new database.
But the sources we are looking at paint a wildly different picture of how Lewandowski is using this SGE title. Homeland Security sources are raising massive concerns that he is operating far beyond the limits of that restricted role.
Far beyond.
The allegations are that he is effectively running the department. He is issuing orders to top officials on Secretary Noem's behalf. And perhaps most incredibly, this unconfirmed outside advisor has allegedly been empowered to approve six-figure government contracts.
In organizational psychology, we call this a shadow hierarchy.
A shadow hierarchy. I like that term.
Yeah, the formal organizational chart says Secretary Noem is in charge, but the actual power center, the person controlling the flow of information, dictating orders, and approving contracts, is Lewandowski.
Wow.
When an individual with a temporary restricted title starts approving massive federal expenditures and dictating operational orders, the traditional chain of command completely breaks down. The accountability structures that are supposed to exist within a federal agency are effectively bypassed because the person pulling the levers hasn't been vetted or confirmed by the Senate.
So if the Democrats in Congress are publicly furious about this shadow hierarchy, how is Noam's own team handling this internally? I have to imagine this level of chaos is setting off alarm bells inside DHS itself.
You would be right.
What did Julia Ainsley's reporting uncover about the internal reaction?
Here's where it gets really interesting. The internal reaction is arguably more severe than the external one. Ainsley's forthcoming book, Undue Process, details a secret 6-hour meeting of senior DHS officials.
6 hours. That is a massive chunk of time for top executives.
According to the preview in The Atlantic, this took place on a winter night last year, shortly after Donald Trump was sworn into office. Top brass at DHS felt compelled to assemble discreetly at a private home in Washington, D.C.
A private home off-site.
Right. They were there to discuss what they explicitly saw as a gathering crisis inside the agency. And that crisis was the relationship between their new boss, Kristi Noem, and Corey Lewandowski, who is described in the text as her advisor, enforcer, and rumored boyfriend.
Just imagine the sheer level of concern it takes for the senior leadership of a federal agency to organize an off-site clandestine meeting that lasts for 6 solid hours, just to map out the ways their boss's relationship could destabilize the entire department.
It's unprecedented.
And we have to put this into the broader context of what DHS was being asked to do at that exact moment. Why was the panic so high right then?
The timing and context are vital. The administration had just recaptured the presidency amid a popular backlash against illegal immigration. President Trump had mandated a shock and awe program of mass deportations.
Which is an enormous logistical undertaking.
Enormous. Think about the logistical weight of that mandate. We are talking about moving thousands of federal agents, coordinating with reluctant or hostile local police departments, securing transportation, and building massive new detention facilities.
Right.
DHS, an agency originally conceived after 9/11 to protect the country from terrorist attacks, is suddenly being ordered to rapidly shift its focus and its massive resources to deliver on an aggressively scaled campaign pledge. It is a monumental operational lift.
And according to the reporting, DHS was not equipped for that lift. Ainsley's book describes the Department of Homeland Security at this time as a dysfunctional fiefdom within the Washington Empire.
A very fitting description.
And right in the middle of this high-stakes, logistically fraught mandate for mass deportations, you have Corey Lewandowski. The text describes him as a menacing, omnipresent operator. But here's the kicker. He has absolutely zero experience in immigration enforcement. None. So how is someone with no experience managing the logistics of the largest deportation program in history?
By controlling the choke points of the bureaucracy.
Okay, explain that.
The extent of his power consolidation is what drove those senior officials to that secret meeting. In Ainsley's account, Lewandowski is inserting himself into nearly every aspect of the agency's daily operations. He's dictating who actually gets heard in meetings.
So he's the ultimate gatekeeper.
Exactly. He is controlling the flow of information, deciding what intelligence or operational updates actually reach Secretary Noem's desk. He is influencing which contractors get hired. He's even involved in deciding what kind of detention facilities are built to hold arrested migrants. He has positioned himself right at the center of everything.
It is a total bottleneck created by someone with no official authority and no subject matter expertise. And when you combine that level of internal dysfunction and shadow hierarchy with real-world crises, things start to fracture publicly in terrible ways.
And we saw that happen.
We did. Which brings us to the reporting from the Wall Street Journal. This isn't just about awkward congressional hearings or secret meetings in D.C. living rooms. This is about operational chaos on the ground that has literal life or death consequences.
Wall Street Journal reporting highlights a specific tragic breaking point where the internal rot manifested as external failure. They note that Noem recognized she desperately needed a reset.
A reset?
Yes. This realization came just 2 days after federal agents shot and killed a man named Alex Preddy in Minneapolis. Noem found herself facing intense fire from all sides over her handling of that chaotic immigration enforcement operation.
And she made it worse with her public messaging. She controversially labeled Pretty's act as domestic terrorism. That comment sparked massive blowback. What exactly happened internally at the White House after she made that statement?
The internal White House reaction was severe. The operational missteps in Minneapolis, compounded by her inflammatory public messaging, created immense pressure. In fact, some inside the administration were actively pushing President Trump to remove Noem from her position entirely because of how poorly she managed the fallout.
Remove her entirely. That's huge.
It ultimately led to the White House having to step in directly to wind down the operations in Minnesota. This perfectly illustrates the real-world consequences of the dysfunctional fiefdom. When a leader is consumed by internal power struggles and managing personal PR optics, their ability to manage a volatile, high-stakes operational crisis on the ground is severely compromised.
And it's so crucial to highlight that the heat she is facing over this compromised leadership isn't just coming from Democrats like Representative Kamala Dove. The criticism is entirely bipartisan.
Very much so.
At that same House hearing where she was grilled about the affair, Republican lawmakers were piling on just as hard. GOP Senator Tom Tillis didn't mince words at all. He publicly branded her leadership a disaster.
A disaster.
He outright demanded her resignation, and he went even further, raising allegations of corruption inside DHS. When you have a Republican senator demanding the resignation of a Republican president's DHS secretary over corruption allegations, you know the internal crisis has spilled completely out into the open.
It is a clear indicator that the political capital protecting her is eroding rapidly. The combination of public operational failures, like the cascading tragedy in Minneapolis, and the undeniable internal chaos orchestrated by Lewandowski's presence, is proving too much for even her staunch political allies to defend.
They just can't defend it anymore.
Right. The distraction is total, and the agency's core mission is suffering as a result.
It really is the ultimate juxtaposition. On one hand, you have a department mandated to execute the most aggressive immigration crackdown in U.S. history, a logistically immense task requiring precision, experience, and clear communication. On the other hand, you have a secretary utilizing a $70 million lease jet, an unconfirmed advisor firing pilots over misplaced luggage and approving six-figure contracts, and senior staff spending 6 hours in a secret meeting just to strategize around their boss's personal relationships.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's really alarming.
It is. So what does this all mean? Why should you, the listener, care about this? Even if you don't follow the daily grind of Washington politics, even if you aren't a political junkie, this entire situation is an absolute masterclass in organizational behavior.
It really is.
It is a real-time case study in crisis management and a stark warning about what happens when the lines between personal relationships and monumental federal power blur completely. We are looking at an agency tasked with the highest levels of national security, but the reporting shows they can barely manage the basic functions of their own house. The internal dysfunction is actively overriding the external mission.
This raises an important question, one that goes far beyond Kristi Noem, Corey Lewandowski, or even the Department of Homeland Security. We need to look closely at the bureaucratic mechanism that made this specific brand of dysfunction possible, the Special Government Employee Designation.
The SGE loophole.
Exactly. If an SGE title, a classification originally designed simply to bring in temporary niche private sector expertise, can be leveraged to give an unelected, unconfirmed individual unilateral control over a massive federal agency's daily operations and six-figure contracts, what does this mean for the structural vulnerability of all government agencies?
That is the million-dollar question.
It invites us to wonder how many other bureaucratic loopholes exist that could allow individuals to bypass traditional oversight and Senate confirmation, fundamentally altering how modern government operates behind closed doors.
That is exactly the kind of question we want you to take away from this. The names and faces in the headlines might change, but the vulnerabilities in the system remain. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope we've helped unpack a really complex situation for you. Keep looking closely at the news, keep asking the hard questions about how power is actually being wielded, and we'll see you next time.